All right, thank you for your patience. Next, we have Jamie Webster, who sent in a pre-recording but is available for questions afterwards from Australia.
Hiya! Sound design in Harry Potter films supports examples of written words in the story. Textbooks of spells and histories, correspondence, newspapers, tabloids, inscriptions, rolls, notes, posters, marginalia, maps, diaries, folktales, and messages in blood are supported differently by 5 different filmmaking teams, each bringing individual perspectives and approaches for representation. For this paper, I include wand spells from the series regardless of whether visuals depict writing, since the connection between spells and book learning is established early on. However, not everything the characters read is true, and not every spell cast has the same power. By examining combinations of utterances, diegetic sounds, and underscore, using the metaphors we use to describe alignments of music, word, and visuals, we find implicit value systems about power and truth that may not align with interpretations of the books alone, or indeed with one film to the next. Much of my analysis is informed by the late music theorist Steve Larson's work on musical forces and metaphors, and by theories of integrated sound design by the late Daniela Kustelich-Wilson. Written words have power in Harry Potter films. While viewer perspectives are shaped by hearing the films with underscore and sound effects, characters gain understanding by reading and seeing. We learn that Harry is magical when he talks with a snake at the zoo because the tinkling music tells us so. But Harry learns for himself when he sees his acceptance letters from Hogwarts. From the moment Harry spies the first letter, we hear Hedwig's theme, then amplified paper sounds, underscore, and owl screeches alternate prominence as more letters arrive, until the sound of letters hurling through the fireplace is louder than the orchestra. Later, when Harry reads the letter for himself, we hear Hedwig's theme again. Written words are powerful when uttered by capable wizards. Young wizards learn from textbooks, but mastery comes with practice. In Professor Flitwick's class, students practice the spell Wingardium Leviosa to raise a feather, but Hermione is the first to succeed. During the students' failed attempts, there is no music, but when Hermione's feather floats, flutes and Celeste accompany with an ascending gesture. Sounds follow the mechanics of spells and verify magical outcomes. Though dialogue says swish and flick, the sounds of spells is more often a short flick followed by a longer swish. Ron's ineffective spell, Sunshine Daisies Buttermellow Turn the Stupid Fat Rat Yellow, is followed by a wand whoosh and a squeal, but the spell has no effect and thus no musical outcome. When Hermione chants Oculus Reparo in the same scene, we hear tick, 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 snap, the sound of the mending glasses. Spell mastery develops over time. When Harry fixes the glasses the first time, the repair is a rickety ratchet. When she repairs the glasses the second time, it sounds like orchestral chimes. The sound design for written text supports narrative truth. When Hermione reads aloud about the Philosopher's Stone in the school library, and when Harry writes correspondence with Tom Riddle's diary, an ominous melodic motif for danger accompanies do 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 do. In contrast, when Mrs. Weasley's scolding howler letter arrives for Ron, the amplified sound of the paper itself dominates without underscore and finishes with a Bronx cheer and the sound of the letter shredding itself into bits. In The Prisoner of Azkaban, sounds elevate naturalness over the mechanics of spells. From the opening incantation, Lumos Maxima, wand spells are cast with fluty sounds, as if the wooden wands are musical instruments with their own voices. Sounds for basic spells are kept simple. When Snape closes the shutters in Potions class, we hear each wand swish followed by each shutter closing. Swish, close, swish, close. For more complex spells, Instrumental underscore supports the intention of the speaker rather than the outcome. We find this in the varied sound support when Harry learns the Patronus charm. Harry must use the strength of his emotions for the spell to work, and we hear Harry's exertion and increasing emotional strength through the volume of his voice and addition of otherworldly choral voices. When Harry is unsuccessful, the sound design supports the boggart. When Harry attempts the charm against the real Dementors, we hear the whoosh but no choral voices. The spell isn't strong enough. Then, when Harry successfully harnesses his emotions, we hear an orb of magical sound, choral voices, a melody for French horns, and a fanfare of brass as his stag dispels the Dementors. The sound design supports emotional truth, but toys with objective truth. When Ron shows a photo of his family's trip to Egypt in the Daily Prophet, we hear a Middle Eastern oboe melody as if it's a remembrance of their holiday. However, as the film shot expands, we see a boy in the background charming a rope from a basket, snake charmer style. The musical ambiguity reflects how truth isn't always at the surface. When the Weasley twins bequeath the Marauders map to Harry, we hear amplified sounds of paper, reinforcing the trusted authority of written words as their own magic. Further, when Peter Pettigrew's name shows up on the map, we hear a distinctive harpsichord motif. The characters wonder if the name is correct. Can the characters hear the motif we hear? The coincidence of the name and motif come full circle when Scabbers the rat transforms into Peter Pettigrew while scampering across a piano. In other words, despite narrative uncertainty, the music tells the truth. In Goblet of Fire, sounds for spells evoke extraordinary natural forces. When Dumbledore draws out a visually wispy memory, the spell sounds like wind. When Victor Crumb submits his paper for the Triwizard Tournament, we hear a Russian-style tune on trumpet and the sound of rumbling thunder. The relationship between music and spells in Goblet of Fire reflects how the bad guys lack moral accountability and their actions are beyond comprehension. When antagonistic journalist Reader Skeeter corners Harry during the Triwizard Tournament, silence contributes to the uncomfortable visuals. Music enters with playful orchestral gestures when Rita's Quick Notes quill begins to write notes, which likewise bear only a playful resemblance to the interview at best. When Mad-Eye Moody's imposter turns Draco into a weasel, repeatedly spinning him in the air, the rollicking underscore similarly reflects how Mad-Eye is just playing, even though the event is disturbing to others. Likewise, cheerful music accompanies Mad-Eye's rogue demonstration of the unforgivable curses on the spider for the students. The contrast between the music and visuals in these examples is jarring, yet plausibly reflects the mindset of Rita and Mad-Eye the imposter, each with little, if any, moral accountability for the consequences of their actions. Only when Mad-Eye kills the spider with the Avada Kedavra curse does the music become somber, aligning with the visuals of the emotional impact on the students. Secondly, changes in sound design reflect how the power of evil spells is beyond comprehension. On the one hand, when the Goblet of Fire predictably nominates 3 students for the Triwizard Tournament, nature blends with orchestra with an amplified combination of fire, thunder, and wind, paired with woodwinds for Victor Crumb, harp and flutes for Fleur Delacour, and French horns for Cedric Diggory. On the other hand, when the goblet unpredictably nominates Harry, the flame sound changes suddenly to a supernatural electric laser shifting erratically in stereo to reflect the evil magic at play. When the fragment with Harry's name flies up, the fluttering sound of the paper itself comes to the foreground, marking its significance. While the design vocabulary is still familiar, it marks a noticeable change in which, unlike fire, wind, and thunder, the new highly processed sound is outside of our natural experience, outside of our control. And it's this new supernatural sound that carries through to Harry's confrontation with Voldemort. Sounds for spells in Order of the Phoenix elaborate the concept of magic hierarchies with sound designs reflecting 3 tiers of power, from basic to greater than greatest. For basic magic, wand spells sound like sound effects, a space-age laser zapping whoosh. Simultaneous orchestral underscore supports mood and atmosphere. Many spells are cast wordlessly, while the human targets vocalize the physical impact with an oof, ugh, ow. Thus, wand sounds reflect intent, while vocalizations verify outcomes. This is different from the early films in which incantations provided intent and sound effects verified outcomes. Regardless of whether Professor Umbridge is harassing students in the hallways or Harry is teaching colleagues how to develop their Patronus charms, the spells create rhythmic patter across playful musical set pieces in common dance meters. As we see in this chart, the standard recipe includes combinations of wand flicks, incantations, swishing sounds, and grunts. However, when the members of the Order of the Phoenix and Dumbledore's army spar with the Death Eaters in the Ministry of Magic, the sound changes. For more combative spells with greater power, orchestral underscore becomes louder, rhythms make a parallel with the energy of conflict, and scoring includes choral voices. Even though these spells undoubtedly inflict greater physical impact, few, if any, of the mature wizards respond with oof, ugh, or ow. Tolerance for pain implies fortitude. When the deadly conflict closes in on a death-defying duel between Voldemort and Dumbledore, the sound design changes tack again to evoke extreme natural forces: an electrical storm, balls of fire, a lion's roar, deluges of water, shattering glass or ice, etc., as if the great wizards are forces of nature. In The Half-Blood Prince, varied sound designs continue to reflect different levels of danger and power. When Harry and Draco spar in the bathroom, there is little, if any, underscore. Sound effects align with movements and spells, and each boy grunts with exertion and impact. In contrast, when the Death Eaters make a scorched earth attack at the burrow earlier in the film, wands emit extended supernatural sounds and underscore pulses and races in tandem with the action. Later, when Dumbledore and Harry fight for their lives in the Horcrux cave, we hear the sounds of extraordinary natural forces again, with the orchestra matching the cycle of sounds for fire and water. At key moments, sound design for spells reveals what's in characters' hearts. Outside of the Patronus charm, this had not been a pattern in the previous films. When Hermione casts an Apognojinx, sending a swarm of canaries to disrupt Ron and his girlfriend, the balance of sounds is topsy-turvy. First, the tweet of the birds overpowers all. Then the volume of the harp dominates over the violins, emphasizing tugged strings, like tugged emotions. Then, Hermione's quiet sob dominates all other sounds. Similarly, orchestral underscore overtakes all other sound when dozens of Hogwarts students and staff raise their wands with the Lumos spell at the death of Dumbledore, the underscore speaking on behalf of their collective grief. Diminished underscore can signal vulnerability. When Slughorn, ashamed, retrieves a memory, the sound of breath is the solo instrument over sustained strings, adding a personal element. Similarly, when Draco disarms Dumbledore in the tower, we hear only the wand flick, then the clatter of Dumbledore's wand to the floor. The lack of either musical underscore or highly processed sound effects supports how Dumbledore sets aside his power, accepting vulnerability. Amidst the growing threat of evil, music for written words continues to reflect sources of wonder as well as narrative truth. In the Order of the Phoenix, we hear pizzicato flutes while Luna reads her Quibbler upside down, and in Half-Blood Prince, intermittent glockenspiel when Luna holds her Spectre Specs edition while wearing her own Spectre Specs. Likewise, music begins when the Half-Blood Prince's potion book is opened, and sound design follows it through accordingly in the potions room and again in the Gryffindor common room. While the book looks as ominous as Tom Riddle's diary, the sounds we hear are cheerful, with bubbly rhythmic punctuation played by double and single reeds and flutes. Similar music cues from the first film support the birth of Norbert, the arrival of the night bus, and the magical extendable ear, all examples of curiosity and wonder accompanied by woodwinds. Thus, while Hermione remains suspicious of the book for much of the film, viewers know it's benign straight away because of the music. Further, atmospheric underscore blends with nature to facilitate a meaningful transition using visuals of the Daily Prophet in The Half-Blood Prince. When Ron, Harry, and Hermione renew their bonds at the Burrow around a fire made from the Daily Prophet, the sound of crackling embers rises once dialogue finishes. Then we see a picture of Draco in the newspaper while an undulating strings pattern emerges. The scene cuts to a downpour in Spinner's End, where Draco's mother and Bellatrix Lestrange enter Snape's home as the melody continues. Inside the home, Snape sits reading his own copy of the Daily Prophet. The ominous music stops abruptly when Snape closes the paper. Creating symmetry in the transition, Narcissa makes her own bond with Snape an unbreakable vow that sets critical events in motion. The undulating strings passage follows visuals of Draco, Narcissa, and Bellatrix, but does not align with Snape, illuminating a truth in the ongoing mystery. Is he good or bad? The varied strategies used in Deathly Hallows 1 and 2 are drawn from the previous films. Orchestral language supports cohesion. Underscore is sparse in the first Deathly Hallows, while the trio of friends is isolated, while the final film is laden with large-scale orchestral cues replete with drum cadences as all-out war becomes imminent. We hear the flick of wand spells as swords or knives unsheathing, and the following whoosh sounds like bombs, explosions, shattering glass, and fire. The tiers of sound design reflecting increasing levels of power continue to play out, while power and emotion become further polarized. The skirmish in the diner includes sounds of knives, explosions, and shattering glass, but no underscore. The more threatening spells cast by the Death Eaters at Bill and Fleur's wedding are supported by both underscore and sound effects. Then, the deadly in-air battle between the Order and the Death Eaters is supported by intense, louder, fuller, faster underscore and sound effects. And then, for the most dangerous and powerful events, such as the battle between Voldemort and Harry, we hear mainly highly processed sound effects with little, if any, underscore. Conversely, events with even more intense emotion use very few sound effects. For instance, we hear only underscore when Hermione uses the Obliviate spell to wipe her parents' memories in order to protect them, and mainly underscore alongside crackling leaves when Hermione casts a garland wreath at the grave of Harry's parents. In summary, sound designs for written words in Harry Potter films reflect many of the standard film music roles, providing clarity, showing progress, and alerting us to key points in the narrative. Further, we find how the approaches of filmmaking teams each provided perspectives on what truth and power look like. When truth is on the surface, when it's underneath, when increasing power is earned, natural or unnatural. The pendulum swing between natural and unnatural sounds for conflict shows danger and perhaps whether love or evil has the upper hand. Through alternating codes evoking naturalness and unnaturalness, as well as the prominence of underscore versus sound effects, we also gain insight into characters' emotional mindset, regulated or dysregulated. Through sound, we find that written words are often a source of pleasure in the films. It has been my pleasure to share my progress with you. Thanks.